Hello and welcome in. My name is Mark, aka the Markster. This is video number 19 in the FreeCAD series. Today we're going to talk about the topological naming issue. I'll explain to the best of my ability what it is, how to fix your model if you run into it, how to design your model to avoid it in the first place, and I'll talk about some code that might be coming in a future version of FreeCAD that perhaps might, a lot of mights in there that might fix this issue. So I'm using today version 0.19, revision number 19694. By the time you watch this, we might be on a version that has already fixed this problem. So to illustrate exactly what the topological naming issue is, let's create a model in which we will trigger this bug. So I'm going to just create a simple model here. I'm not going to bother constraining. Just going to create a simple 5-sided figure. We'll go back to part. We'll extrude. Back to Sketcher. By the way, there's a pull release, some code that username OpenBrain has created. That's going to enable us, hopefully, to be able to have two views open with a different workbench in each view. So it'll be much easier to switch back and forth. Right here on the tab, one view like this, you can create a new view here to show you. So one view could have the sketcher, the other view could have the part, and just switch back and forth rather than having to switch back and forth here. So that's some interesting code. He already has a macro that works to do this. It's on the forum. But anyway, I got sidetracked there. So the problem generally comes in when you map your sketch to a face. This is a very convenient, easy way to do your modeling, but it has a problem that it leaves you vulnerable to this bug, this topological naming issue. So let's do that to illustrate. We'll select our face first, and then select to create a new sketch. And instead of coming up, let's cancel to show you. Instead of coming up with this dialog to choose a plane, if you have a face selected, it'll come up and ask you the attachment method, and the default you want is flat face if you want to attach to that face. So now your sketch is on this plane of this first face, of the selected face. Again, very quick, very convenient. It just leaves you vulnerable to this bug. So I'm just going to add that here. I'm not going to constrain the sketch. Extrude. And we'll fuse these together. So let's imagine this is some part that we need for some project. And we make the part and we try it out, and as so often happens, we need to make some minor revision. In this case, we decide that we need a curved front here instead of this pointed front so that this part can turn. So what we can do is just open the sketch, and we can delete these edges and add an arc in its place. So what I'm going to do is just toggle this to construction mode, because I might decide to add these back in, and I'll have it already made, and I'll be able to just toggle that from construction mode back and forth. So now we get the error message. Failed to recompute. Subshape not found. So you might ask, what's going on here if you don't know about this issue. And you see this sketch has a problem. But that's not even the sketch we just modified. This is the sketch we modified, not this one. Why does this one have the problem? And why is this not round? We just made it round. Why is it not round? So these are questions and concerns that someone might have who's not familiar with this issue. So what causes the issue? And what causes it is we map to this face, and this face no longer exists anymore. So let's delete this fusion. And I'm going to delete this extrude as well, and delete that one, and say yes, I want to continue. I'm starting over. I'm going to clear these errors. Let's try again. This time I'm going to toggle these back to where they were. Notice these two lines are construction mode. This arc is normal mode. I select all three and toggle. I can reverse that. So now the arc is in construction mode. Let's extrude this sketch like we did last time. And now this sketch here, no reference selected, deactivated. Let's set it to the default like it was. So now let me just delete the sketch entirely since it's trivial. Create the new sketch. Map to the face. Notice face 7 down here in the bottom left corner. It shows your document name, the object name, and the sub-object name. You have 3 different types of sub-objects. You have faces, you have edges, and you have vertex. Vertices. Vertex 8 here. This one is vertex 6. This face is face 3. So down here in the bottom left corner on the status bar, it shows you the name of the pre-selected face. So in this case, we're going to map to face 7. And we'll put our circle back. Something like that. Now, look at the support property. It shows extrude face 7. That's the face we're linked to. If we click the map mode and bring up the attachment, we see that extrude face 7 is what our sketch is attached to. It's what it's mapped to. And the mapping mode is plane face. And go back to part, extrude. Okay. So this was phase 7 of the extrude object. And now we fuse. Go back and make our change again. Just toggling it back as a quick and easy. Now we trigger the error again. We'll delete the fusion object. Notice when we click on this sketch on the flat face mode, it says subshape not found, face 7 not found. Let's hide this for the moment. This is no longer face 7. Look, it's face 6 now. So that's the problem. We have face 4 here. This is one single face. In the previous version, we had 2 faces. I would have to change the sketch back. But we had 2 faces before. And that made this one face 7. Because instead of 1, we had 2. And now, sketch 1 cannot find face 7. If during the modification of the sketch that this extrude object was made from, if we remove faces, we might end up with the situation we have now where face 7 does not even exist. Had we added faces, we might end up with a situation where face 7 is now this face. And so our circle, our sketch with the circle would be mapped to this face instead. Or maybe this face. Or maybe the bottom. So that's the topological naming issue. The way to fix it is to just remap the face, remap the sketch back to the desired face. And that will solve that problem. Let's fuse these together again. Clear the error out. So now no more errors here. Everything is working fine again. In a trivially simple model like this, remapping the sketch is very simple to do, provided you know what the problem is, you're familiar with this issue, and you know what to look for and how to fix it. Imagine we had 12 sketches, 12 different extrude objects, and each one attached to a face of the previous. And we went back and modified the first sketch, and now every single object is out of place or showing errors. And we don't know which one to start with, because just fixing the first one might fix all the rest, or it might not. Just depends on the model. So it might be a lot of trouble, a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of time spent with a really complex model, a dozen or more extrude objects and fusions and cuts and everything else. So avoiding the problem in the first place might make more sense than risking it and then going in and fixing later. So how to avoid the problem? I'll show you a way to avoid it. I'm going to delete these. Again, let me change the map mode here. We can delete this so that nothing is selected. Select deactivate it. And now refresh. I can delete this one without any errors popping up. I'm just going to delete this sketch and recreate it again. And this I will toggle back like it was before. Originally, we can extrude. And now instead of selecting here and creating our sketch to map to this face, we won't select anything. We'll put it on the appropriate plane. If I wanted to map to this face, I would select the XZ plane. This face, I would select the YZ plane. This face, we'd have to rotate the sketch to line it up. A little bit trickier. But for now, I'll just select the XY plane since that's where I want this part. And I'll just close the sketch before drawing the circle. I'll come down here to placement. I'll just leave it unattached. And I'm going to move it up in the Z direction. And that will be by the amount of this extrude. So I could put it to 10 since it was 10. But that leaves me with a model that's not parametric, because if I later decide to change this extrude value, the sketch is not going to move with it. So what I would prefer to do is link to the extrude object length forward property. And now we open the sketch, we see we're right where we want it. And we can add our circle back where it was. Roughly, I'm not making a real project here. And back to part, extrude. Let's fuse these together. And now again we decide we need to change this front. And we toggle it. And we have no errors. And everything is where it's supposed to be. And if we change the length forward to say 15, it moves with it. Normally I would make a spreadsheet. I would add my variables to the spreadsheet, and instead of linking to extrude length forward, I would have a variable, perhaps called layer 1 height, and I would set the extrude property to reference that spreadsheet object here, as we've done many times before in the video series already. And then the sketch would be placed, instead of linking to extrude length forward, it would be linked to the spreadsheet variable, the alias. So that is a way to avoid the topological naming issue. It's a lot more work. Be a lot easier, wouldn't it, if we could just map the faces. There is some code that perhaps is coming in, maybe into 0.20. I don't know that for sure. I'm not the one making that decision, but I know the code already exists. It's already been written. It's by a user named Real Thunder. He is the one who provided this link functionality, link actions. This is new for 0.19. We haven't talked about this yet. Largely because, to be honest with you, and I always try to be, I don't know a lot about it. It's new, and I haven't experimented with it. So this link thing it's just not something I know enough about to be able to try to teach you. Maybe I'll learn about it and then do a video on it. But for now, I'm going to stick to what I really know, and I'm going to be honest with you and tell you when I don't know something. I'm not the greatest expert on FreeCAD, right? I know enough to make the simple models I need to make, and that's what I do with it. So I haven't had calls to use this link function. My understanding is you can use it to create something like an array of objects. It'd be a lighter weight array. I think the pegboard model that I made earlier in the series, if I can figure out how to do it with links, that would be a good example. If it works a lot faster and gives you a lot better performance, because that pegboard can really bog down FreeCAD, even if with a new modern PC. And mine is not new. It's an old computer. It's got one of the original i7 processors, so it's getting long in the tooth. But if the link functionality gives you that capability, and I don't know that it will, but it's the same object, just a link to the object. So for each little hole in the pegboard is a separate, as I understand, again, I'm not that familiar with it. Instead of having 1,000 cylinders, you have one cylinder and 1,000 references, and the performance will be faster. Somebody who probably knows how to use this is probably shaking his head saying, you don't know what you're talking about, and you're right, I don't. But that's my understanding of how it works. It's also useful, again, as I have limited understanding on this, when you use an assembler. It's going to make adding an assembler to FreeCAD, a real assembler, more doable. And the way an assembler works is you can create constraints between two solid objects and assemble them in that fashion, similar to the constraints that you have inside the sketcher. We can do attaching and attachment offsets. So that's what I generally do, and that's why I haven't looked into using an assembler. The work that I'm doing, it might or might not benefit, I don't know. It might or might not benefit to using an assembler. So anyway, Real Thunder, the username, I don't know his real name, but Real Thunder has written an assembler. He was going to make it, the last I heard, a workbench that could be added on with the add-on manager, but I don't know if that's been done yet. Assembly 4, so this is it. So this can be added, and it uses the link tools, the link functionality, to make this assembly workbench work. Again, I have never installed it. I don't know how to use it. Assembly 2 was the old assembler, and it had some limited functionality because of the lack of this link capability. So that's something that I would probably need to install and experiment with and learn about before I would be prepared to do a video on using an assembler. There are videos out there on the subject. So anyway, the same user, Real Thunder, has created some code to address this topological naming issue. I believe it's going to be integrated into FreeCAD during the 0.20 development cycle. I don't know for sure that's going to happen. I'm not the one making that decision, and I'm not trying to pressure anybody into making the decision. I trust the people involved. Werner and York will be making that call. I trust those guys to make the right decision. So we'll leave it at that. If its timing is not right yet in 0.20, then fine. It can come in later. Perhaps never at all. I don't know. I don't know if his fix is going to work, if it's going to partially work, if it's not going to work at all. I don't know. I suspect it will work at least partially. But I also suspect bringing it in is going to add a lot more complexity to FreeCAD code, making it harder to maintain. So that'll have to be a decision that other people are going to make. I'm sure a lot of the community will weigh in on that when the time comes. So how will the code work? not all that familiar with it, but my understanding, which could be wrong, is going to use globally unique identifiers to attach to these faces and be able to track them as you make the changes. So you'll stay attached to that face because of using those globally unique identifiers, GUIDs. And I think it'll be attached to the sketch elements themselves. And then whatever is built up from the sketch will inherit that name, that globally unique identifier name extension perhaps. Again, I don't know exactly how it's implemented, but that's my somewhat understanding of it. So it's going to add a lot of complexity, but if it works, it's going to be great. It's going to be outstanding, because then you'll be able to ignore this topological naming issue and just map to your faces and just really be a lot more efficient in the modeling. As it stands now, this workaround here, moving this placement of the sketch, I mean, it's a little bit of a hassle. It's not that bad, but it's a little bit of a hassle. You have to deal with that when it would be so much easier just to map to the face and keep moving. Whether this workaround of adjusting these placement, whether that's easier than just fixing the problem when it arises, I'm not sure. Might be easier just to map to the face, and when you have a problem, go in and fix it. And that might depend on the complexity of the model as well. So that's what I know about it. That's what I don't know about it. There are a lot of things I don't know about FreeCAD. I don't pretend to be the world's greatest expert. I do think I have a decent enough working knowledge of at least the basics to be able to come in here and teach new users about it. And I said earlier during the series that I'm not here to make really complicated models to show how smart I am or how good I am. I'm just going to make basic models to illustrate the example of the topic of the day, and then you'll be able to piece all those together and make your models, more complex than the examples that I'm making here. There's also a time constraint. No one wants to watch a 2-hour video. I certainly don't. Mine are already too long. I'm trying to keep them in the 30-minute range, but once I start yapping, I just keep on yapping, it seems. So anyway, that's it for today. Hopefully you know a little bit more now about this rather confusing issue, and at least you have an idea of what might have gone wrong. There are people who will say, don't map to the face, instead use the sketch, make the sketch visible and map to it instead. But I don't think, honestly, that trick is going to be foolproof either. It might be more robust if you can link to elements in a sketch instead, like I did in the previous donut cutter video. You might remember I made a link to external geometry rather than using the variables in the spreadsheet to position the path sketch. You can go back and watch that if you haven't. It's the previous video, I believe. I created a link to external geometry rather than position a sketch with based on the variables in the spreadsheet. That does leave me vulnerable to this topological naming issue if I were to go in and make changes to that sketch. This is the handle, I think it's sketch 003 in that video. If I was to modify that handle sketch, it might possibly cause problems with the way the other sketch for the path for the handle is mapped to it. If it does happen, I know how to fix it, so it's not a big deal. But just understand, in my opinion, mapping to elements in the sketch is it's not going to protect you entirely from this issue, because the elements in the sketch are also named, and those names can change with later sketch modifications. Linking to external geometry is risky, in that if the external geometry changes, and not just a dimensional change, I mean a topological change, it could cause your links it could break your model, in other words. So be cautious in using links to external geometry. Be very cautious when mapping to faces. Sometimes a really simple model like this, we can get away with it. Just map to it and move on. Something a little more complicated, maybe you're better off trying to avoid the issue from the beginning. And you want your model to be parametric, so you use that spreadsheet and those variables in there and calculate the positions of your sketches. It's a little bit more work up front, but it makes modifying those variables later much easier. You'll have a fully parametric sketch if you do it all right, and it'll be reusable. You need, like the funnel that we've done so many times. If I need a new funnel now, I can just open that funnel, open that funnel file, change those variables, get the exact size that I need for that particular shape of funnel. So that's a very reusable model, instead of having to go in and remodel again each time I want a different size funnel. So making your models more parametric is always better. It makes your models better, because you can go in and make changes, tweak it out a little bit without fear of breaking the model. And like in this case, we're able to turn this into a round front without messing up the model. And if it had been a more complicated model, let's say with a dozen different objects in it, I might decide it's too much trouble to track down all these errors. Just undo the last operation and just live with it like it is. Or maybe take a knife or a file or something and round it off myself. So I'm not making as good of a model because it's too much trouble to make it perfect if it's not parametric. If it's parametric, you can get it closer to perfection. So that's my take on it, and that's my understanding of this topological naming issue. Hopefully I've shed some light on it for you. Hopefully you understand it a little bit better now. Hopefully I haven't confused you even more. So once again, as always, I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.